Welcome back. Now it's time for the interview segment. As you all know it to be, I love to call it the discussion segment. We get to discuss things happening in our society, happening in the country, in the environment at large. And today we have an amazing person who will be joining us to discuss something very important, in our society, in the environment at large, and even across the globe. Basically, we'll be talking about climate change, addressing the risks and global effects. We know when it comes to climate change, many people are not aware. Many people are not really concerned about it. We hear words like global warming. We hear words like excessive rainfall, flooding, and all of those things. And I have someone here who would be doing justice to that. He's a climate data journalist, and he goes by the name Kehinde Ogunyale. Thank you so much for joining us. He'll be joining us via Skype. So thank you so much for joining us, Professor.
Thank you very much. How are you doing?
How are you doing this morning?
I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So let's go straight into the discussion for today. The topic is climate change, addressing the risks and the global effect basically across the globe. So for some people, let's start from what climate change is. What would you say climate change is for people who might not know what it is? I'm sure people have been hearing what climate change is, but they are not sure what exactly it is, and they hear words like global warming. There's this, there's that. So what exactly is climate change?
So let's just start basically with a simple definition. I've heard you say what's like global warming. I've heard you also say what like climate change. So over some decades ago, we had always been used to the idea of global warming and seeing the rise in temperature and how it's probably affecting a lot of probably a lot of things that we do. Even basically environmental structure. But with this, as the year progressed, we began to see that this temperature was not really only the cause, but several environmental activities, human themselves. Then hence the word climate change. So climate change just encompasses all other activities that involve the environment, all other activities, even down to wildlife, down to deforestation, down to wildfire and the likes. Also in global warming, that just affects basically the environment. So you see activities like mining, you see activities like cutting down trees, you see activities like even pollution, you see activities like littering the environment, oil spillage and the likes, contributing down to either affecting the way we breathe, affecting the amount of rainfall, affecting sea level either drying up or even rising up, affecting things like bringing down flood that we have experienced in Nigeria, or even making a particular environment quite more cold or more cold, and even down to the animal region where we have hunting and poaching, illegal killing of some of these wildlife that also play a very good role in that whole exchange. So the idea is the exchange of the exchange of carbon and oxygen while we breathe in and breathe out. So what is happening right now is that we are having excessive of those carbon outside, so excessive of CO2 outside, and we're not having enough of oxygen. So it's like choking that space, and which is just transcending to just bring out several many things that just in turn affect the environment basically.
Thank you so much for that explanation. So you are a climate data journalist, and I'm sure you have different data across different countries or different states when it comes to climate change issues. Why is there a focus on it right now? I think lately in the past 2, 3, 5 years now, there's been so much information, so much focus on climate change and how the government needs to pay attention to it and thereabout. So why is there focus on it right now? Would you say that Nigeria is at a negative risk, or Nigeria is at the risk of having climate issues that's stemming from the negative point? Or basically, why is there so much focus on it right now? And do you think that people are aware that there's something called climate change, and we need to be aware of our environment and the things that can contribute to to climate change?
Okay, so that's like about 3 questions in one. I'll just take them in segments. Number 1, what are the data available? Let's just use Nigeria for focus points. Last year, we all experienced flooding. In fact, there
Yes.
need not to be data for you to see that flooding actually killed like a lot of people. And
Very true.
when uh, uh, the National Emergency Agency said, gave out data, we had about like 1.4 million people who were affected by it, and over 600 persons died. A decade ago, that's about 2012, we had that same repeated event, although most of it was just caused by several infrastructural issues. But we can't take away the fact that excessive rainfall that happened between August, September, October also contributed part of this. So there's, and that moves down to the second question, where there's the government role on infrastructural deficits, but there's also a lot of contributions where we humans also contribute to also partake in making sure that or making this stuff happen to us. So and people are aware of it. Yeah, it's so unfortunate that it's after a lot of crisis that we are seeing that the whole idea is coming down into people. Now, people might really not be aware of the whole climate change in quotes, especially if you go down to the region, the rural area.
The rural areas, yes, rural communities.
I've been in several of those communities, and a lot of them, even surrounded by forests, just know the idea of going to the wood, going down into the forest, cutting down trees and using firewood, or if probably a big man comes and say he needs a lot of this wood for and gives them a good amount of money, they just go inside and just cut everything down, and without realizing that bringing down some of this would also play a very big role in affecting the environment. That's the temperature of their environment. So if you see some of these communities in 2-3 decades ago, they were much colder. Most of them who are farmers have a way of monitoring how rainfall, the time to plant these particular crops, and so on. But right now, what we have is there's this instability in how the temperature rises, there's this instability in how rain falls. So the farmers cannot predict. And in turn, what it does is that it reduces their crops, it reduces their farming, and it reduces their yield, and obviously it reduces the profits they make out of this farming business. So yeah, are there a lot of preparation or sensitization that has been done? Yes, to a fairly good extent, but then it does not commemorate with the problems that we still face, because as climate change is also an issue in Nigeria, it's also a global issue. We have several discussions. Just a lot of emission by several industries. So you find industrial organizations just going in, investing and establishing plants, and just releasing a lot of this CO2, and there's no preparation basically. I can challenge you to go down to several infrastructural places that you have seen bigger companies, probably mining company, a production
cement production companies.
Exactly. That see as low as the road network. Not even, let's leave that's just infrastructure. See as low as the environment, and see how some of those air that they release in so many regions, you find out that they cannot breathe properly. About last year, we were recording several ailments from Port Harcourt. The southern region, seeing a lot of those black suits, and because there has been a lot of oil exploration around those regions. So those are some of those factors. So are there sensitization going on? Yes, to a very large extent, there are sensitization going on, but this is not really agreeing up to what we are really facing. And that's why even I as journalists are bringing so many of these voices out to make sure that, okay, this issue is actually a real issue that is affecting people. So coming down from the flood right now, we had a lot of that event last year, and in this year we had several predictions, even by NEMA, and predicting that during the same time we're going to have even more increasing flood risks. What are the preparations that has been done by the government and probably other relevant agencies, seeing that this issue is being tackled? You fairly will see, basically what you will see is sensitization, but this goes beyond that, right?
Yeah, so very true.
1 month or few weeks, we have seen places like Abuja, I've heard places like Ekiti already getting flooded because of rainfall. And this, in the next coming months, become excessive. So what really is the government in place? So that agrees basically with my answer when I say that, yes, there are works in place, but really it's not enough to capture what the crisis that we are facing.
Thank you so much for that answer. And you've actually said a lot, and I think from what you said, I actually want to bring out something. You mentioned something that I would have loved to talk about, where about manufacturing companies, where they have to they put down their factories within within a community where people live and where people do stuff. And at the end of the day, I remember I think traveling out of Lagos State, and I saw a manufacturing company producing cement, and their factory is situated right in the community where people are. Everywhere that community was just full of dust, full of cement particles and all of that. And many of them are not educated. Many of them do not know the impact this has on their health most times. And we see that even the people living there are people that work in the factories, and they probably give them about stipends just so that they wouldn't see anything, or they'll keep their mouth shut and not have to report to the government and all of that. Now, what do you think the government can do? Because there's always the sensitization that the people like you come to tell other climate change organizations, go out to tell people in the rural communities and say, oh, this is not good, you have to pay attention to your climate, you have to protect the environment, you have to do this, you have to do that. What about companies? What about factories? They are well educated, of course, they know what they are doing, they know the impact, they know the implication of setting up a factory right in the community where people are. So what do you think can be done to address that situation? And then there is another which also goes hand in hand. Lagos, as a case study, we see that there are so many houses built on probably a small space or a small land. You can see a very huge structure which doesn't bring, and you can see about 2 or 3 different structures, and because of that there's improper ventilation. Everywhere is hot, everywhere is stuffy, and also what can be done in that regard as well? Because I think these are the issues that come from these are what brings up climate change issues, the heat, that's the global warming, and of course factories that situate their factories in the middle of communities, and then have people have to take in bad air. Yeah, so what do you think can be done in this regard? Because these people are educated and they know what they are doing.
Okay, yeah. So I'll start from the last question. So Lagos is not only the state that's facing these risks. Even down in Abuja here, you have several communities also build houses on water access area, and yeah, it boils down to, I've been in several communities, several states, and I've seen a lot about it. Go down to the south, you see that a lot. So really, there's still a lot that needs to be done. There's the human factor of responsibility, and also the government factor of responsibility. So I know so well that what I believe would be that government has to play a key role in climate mitigation. That's play the major role for tracking some of these. So what we have right now, or what is obtainable right now, is several NGOs leading this conversation and trying to sensitize people and pushing for actions to be carried out, even laws. Just recently, about 2 years ago, we had the former president put into law and which established a commission that manages climate change in Nigeria. This was not there for so many years, and we've had issues of flood. So yeah, government needs to play a key role in climate mitigation, but however, there's still a lot as per infrastructural management and infrastructural management on how some of these issues can be tackled. There's still a lot to be done on environmental management. About, I think, a month ago, I was speaking on a radio show where we talked about environmental sanitation, and we used to, at least growing up then, we used to know how there's a lot of there's this holiday, holiday of break that's always happening on Saturday and Thursday.
Thursdays, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. For environmental sanitation, then we have Thursdays for the market also. We already see some of those things right now. So, and when we talk about climate change, people always think it's like a bigger issue. It has to be as large as an industrial organization releasing a lot of carbon to the air. But meanwhile, as low as pollution, you get to several houses. Let me use Lagos, for instance, because I've been there. You get to several houses and you can't see a proper drainage system, right? So then you try to see where does this water actually pass through, right? You get to a lot of houses, and just like you said, they are built beside dams, beside canals, and so on. And people are living there. So you want to wonder when water rises, what do these people do? And even after flooding incident, you can check online and see how several residents who were affected by the flood are still returned back to their environment, because up till now we have not had a government agenda that actually push those people out and even give them a place to stay. So then the government comes out and say, if you're living in flood zone area and probably you see this X red sign marked by several agencies, leave this area. But where do these people stay? I mean, they practically spend. This is family. I mean, the household data on Nigeria is about 5 members per family. So you have at least an average of 5 members in the family. Where do they stay? So there's still a lot of conversation around, like I said, infrastructural management. There's still a lot of conversation about environmental management, and these conversations are internal. Before we even start going to the global contributions, where Nigeria can now start requesting for financing, Nigeria can start requesting for support from this global, because basically in the world's data, right, even Africa is contributing lesser than 10%, if I'm not mistaken, lesser than 10% to climate crisis that happens globally. So you want to see that Africa is contributing quite less to what is affecting us globally, but yet Africa is really the most affected continent, right, to this crisis, because then we don't have proper financing, we don't have good government who are taking management and who are taking crisis management as their priority. What we have is just a lot of embezzlement, a lot of corruptions that are leading conversations, right? So what we need basically is just should I say a realistic government that plays a key, that puts its own administration to play a key role in solving several climate issues. And I can tell you, because sometimes when we discuss issues about climate, people just think, like I said earlier, it's just a big word. But climate change really can increase even as low as diseases, right? So let me give you a practical example. You have flooding in a particular environment. If that particular water stays for 2 days, you begin to see mosquitoes, right?
Definitely, and very true.
It increases malaria. Then health problem that is caused because of climate change, right? So if flooding affects a particular community, then you know that there's poor access to water in that environment. There's also poor access to food or farming activities. Why? Because flood wiped us a lot of crops. So climate change issues a lot of problems that affect several other aspects, like health, like food production, like agriculture, and it's technology, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So that's why I said there's a lot beyond NGO advocating for this. There's a lot that government has to do, and government needs to play a key role in these conversations that we're having.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk about the signs that individuals should look out for. Now we see that it's intertwined. NGOs, individuals, groups, the government, everybody needs to come together to make sure that these issues do not literally like sweep us off our feet. So what are the signs to look out for, you know, in the environment, and let's say in a community now, which is the smallest, before we even, you know, go down to the state or even the country at large. So let's start from the community. What are the signs to look out for when I know that, okay, this is not right. I think this is going to be this is going to be a huge negative impact on our climate and the environment. Like you said, maybe many people think or feel like climate change is a big word. So when they hear climate change, it's like, oh, it's the end of the world. Something huge is coming. I recently saw in the news where I think in Greece, yes, there was I think there was a heat wave that sparked fires, and they had to like evacuate a lot of people. I think I saw that 2 days ago. I think yesterday. I'm not very sure about that. So what are the signs to really look out for? What are the things that should be prevented, that should be added to, or maybe prevented, to make sure that the environment is safe for everybody to live in, both human beings, both animals? What can be done as regards that?
Okay, so yeah, the signs obviously are relative depending on which community that you're in. So the signs obviously in the upper north is quite different from the signs to look out for in the down south. If you see mostly last year when flooding affected Nigeria, a lot of the southern states were more affected than the northern parts, because we were close down to the Pacific, and so a lot of that channels of water is kind of around southern states than the northern states. So the signs are quite relative per community. If you go down to some community around the Cross River region, what you'll be telling them there is to stop things like deforestation, cutting down trees, killing of wildlife. That's what you'll be telling them there. If you come down to the southwest side, what you'll be telling us around here is things like environmental pollution. We should watch out for it. Proper drainage system, right? If you go down to the upper north, right, you would where you have a lot of people, right, you would almost be talking about things like overpopulation, because sometimes this overpopulation can generate a lot of heat, and then it also affects these people around that place. So yeah, right. So signs are quite relative to different states and different communities. But basically, you have infrastructure, right? You have environment. So like I've mentioned earlier in the conversation, proper drainage system, proper sanitation of the environment, make sure that there's a tree around you, you plant a tree at least to help exhume some of those carbon that you bring out. So we are planting a tree. We have even listening down to even as low as cooking, right? We advise most likely that public transportation should be reduced, right? So I was checking the data yesterday, and I discovered that at least as of 2018, Nigeria has about 11.8 vehicles in the country. As of 2018, we have 11.8. So imagine everybody every day driving, taking their cars to get to a particular appointment or get to their office, and in the process of driving, the car is releasing carbon, right? But if we have like mass transit, where we have a long Tata bus that takes a lot of people in and transport them to that particular environment, we have reduced. So if a long Tata bus can take as high as 35 people, it means we have reduced 35 cars. If individually all of them have a car, we have reduced 35 cars for being on the road, right? So those are just like little things that the government and even we as people can do. So there's a lot of eating of even vegetables. So when you say eating of vegetables, people think that we are just talking about health, but really, if you consume a lot of vegetables rather than consuming meat, I mean, you get to parties today and you see cows, you see. I know in Lagos, I've been in Lagos very well, where you can walk into some market and ask them you want to buy elephant trunk, and they will give you. So you wonder, where did they really get those things from? And it's true, killings, right? Pollution of and the sea. Go to side like, I'm going to use Lagos for example. Go to side like Ekpe, where you have a lot of rivers around that place, and you begin to see several sea pollution. People are doing
seafood, different types.
Exactly. Then, and where you see all this aquatic animal, is still where these people channel their drainage system to affect this sea. You get so it end up killing these animals, and there's a lot that even the sea can play in absorbing carbon, right? So these are just normal environmental stuff that even we know, right? We know, but we kind of being careless, and because of the need to develop and also meet up with the world standard of developing, so we want to bring in a lot of this thing. And thank God we're beginning to talk about, right now, we're beginning to change the conversation, like vehicles, we're beginning to change the conversation from using petrol powered vehicles down to
electric powered
electric
vehicles.
right now, which also save that, right? Nigeria has an electricity problem, right? If
Very
we
true.
have a way of, exactly, if we have a way of finding that, addressing that issue where most of our electricity is collected from solar rather than from fuel, right? Rather from only your generator, maybe thanks to scarcity right now. So everybody, thanks to the hike
We
in fuel, so
conserve,
everybody's not,
fuel, yeah.
everybody's not. So, but really, and you get to some from houses. If you see the I pass my neighbor that is releasing this kind of smoke, you would almost cry, right? So, if we can switch from a petrol consumed generator down to solar, which is absorbing the sunlight, that would be quite good. So all we're just preaching more of this time is seeing how we can restructure the environment from how we depend on some of these things that gives us that we use on the daily activities to the more safer one, right? More preferable one. So if you go down to the south states where you have several oil spillages, you won't be speaking with a lot of organizations and companies who are doing a lot of oil exploration, and even talk to as low as people who are involved in oil theft and oil bunkering and oil refining. I mean, you go to some south states, you
Okay,
see
okay,
you see
Professor. I'm sure that there are so many things to to
so
talk about, so many things that you obviously would know and you would want to talk about, just so we know that okay, there are things that there are solutions to this rising problem. But then
yeah.
you mentioned you mentioned people not having to make use of of cars anymore, trying to move from fuel power generators to solar power generators, if there can be something like that, or maybe to solar electricity. There are so many things you've mentioned, but you are in the field. I'm sure you've seen people, you've conversed with so many people. Do you think this is possible in the coming years? Because really, I'm trying to see the possibility of it, but having to tell people in Nigeria who see having cars as a status symbol. Oh, if you have a car, that means that you are doing well for yourself, and it gives you
Exactly.
that kind of right to brag. There's this bragging power. It confers on a person, and then you have to tell them that okay, why not enter a bus instead of you using your car? That's like an insult to them. So I think that's the limitation for for people like that the mindset has to change. So do you think that this is really going to be possible in the coming years if and when the government decides to do something about it, and when all NGOs come together and they start seeing the result of their work? Do you think this is really going to be possible?
Yeah, I think you have put the caveat here. If the government takes the responsibility, and that's why when I started, I said the government must play a key role in some of these mitigations conversation and adaptation conversations, right? So if the government decides to play a key role, I mean, we are ruled by the government. So let give you a good instance. When your president came up and said, today it's the removal of subsidy and fuel subsidy is no more, whether we liked it or not.
You have to adapt by all means.
We're not. So if the government play a key role in setting agenda for some of these things, I mean, we'll begin to see a lot of improvement in it. So NGOs only have power, but only have a limited ability. They can't reach out to the whole of Nigeria. So, but the government comes up and gives a decree, gives up, and they say we have agencies, a lot of enforcing agencies that can implement some of these things. So, if you know that there's a jail term, you can get arrested. If you litter your environment, you can do this. When the whole sanitation program started in Lagos State, we almost get off every morning to cut our bushes, because we know that if there's a name they give them, I've forgotten. If they come to your house last one, they'll give you fine, and you have no choice. You have not gotten what to eat that day, then you are paying for fine because you forgot to get up to cut your grass. So if government plays a key role, leading some of these conversations, then we have it solved.
Thank you so much, Professor. I really enjoyed, the conversation. I wish I can go on. I'm sure I have so many questions, surrounding climate change, something I've been interested in for a long time, and I really want to, know so many things. And I'm sure that our audience as well also would like to know, so many things about climate change. But we're out of time, and the show has to go on. So thank you so much once again. I really enjoyed the conversation with you. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Now we'll go on a short break to continue with Daybreak Africa. Just stay with us.